G'day, friends and fans. Welcome to an interview with M F Elliott. I'm your host, the author David Applegate, author of the books The Boyhood of Cade, ProWritingAid, and Into the Elves Mound. Now, this channel is sponsored by you, the viewing audience, so links in the description below, as well as Elliott's link. And without further ado, here is himself, Mr. Elliott. Please introduce yourself to the audience.
How's it going over there?
Yeah, good. Oh, introduce yourself to the audience, please.
Nothing good.
Sorry, can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes. There's a clicking or something noise in the background.
It might be the fan. I have 4 cats behind me.
Ah, okay. All right.
We have 2 boys and 2 girl cats. They run around a lot.
Okay. Introduce yourself to the audience, please. Tell us a bit about yourself.
Hello, audience. I'm M F Elliott. I write novels. When I'm not there, I work part-time, and I'm also at the gym when I'm not doing that, so I'm around. I enjoy reading, I enjoy writing more, so.
Yeah, I enjoy writing more too. Sorry. Just gathering my place here. When did you realize you wanted to be a writer?
I was about between 8 or 9 years old. My mom used to teach me how to draw comics and to write, and I started writing my own little books. And I started peddling them to family members to read.
That's cool. How'd you do? All right. Got a taste for writing, I guess. Tell us more about your books.
I'm sorry, come again?
Can you tell us more about your books?
When did I start writing books?
No, to live and to die for. Tell us more about your book.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, sorry.
That is actually a paranormal romance horror story. I actually wrote that in 1999 as part of an anthology of short stories. And about 2.5 years ago, I made that short story into a complete novel. It's a paranormal romance horror, as I said, but it's about the 2 young people who are high schoolers. They have to overcome some evil forces that literally awaken after about 1,000 years after they start dating each other, which actually starts targeting her friends' friends, the school bullies. They don't know what it is. They just know they have to survive it somehow.
Okay. What did you do to prepare for writing? What's your preparation?
What do I usually do to prep?
Yeah.
To prepare?
Yeah.
Well,
prepare.
Oftentimes I will get an idea of a story I want to put down. It usually be inspired by something else, a dream or a nightmare. But when I put it down on paper, it's literally an idea forms. It's usually from a nightmare. Dream goes straight to paper. I have it done in like 2 months.
Wow.
It's usually the fastest I can do it.
Yeah. Well, I have written fast in the past, but it takes me about a year to complete the first draft and then another year or so of editing. It's not very fast. What are your inspirations?
What inspires me to do them? A lot of times it'll be everyday things, music, nature. A lot of my ideas will come from a dream or a nightmare I had, so it'll pop in my head. Sometimes it's from a conversation. Sometimes it's rarely ever political. I don't get into that. That's just not my thing. But To Live and to Die For was literally stemmed from an idea I had. I was inspired from a previous novel I had written a few years before that. I wrote that in 1999, so I wrote a full-length novel my first one actually in 1993 when I was in ninth grade. And what inspired me was, what was her name? Elizabeth Bathory in English, the alleged vampire from several hundred years ago. That actually inspired me for that book because it gave me a completely different idea for a different story altogether, set in 1999 with the two high schoolers trying to overcome unusual forces of nature that are on the fringe of paranormal and not.
Yes, Bathory was allegedly the most prolific serial killer in history.
Yes.
And she was Hungarian.
Yes,
She's
that's
alleged
right.
to have killed over 700 women and bathed in their blood. She was also inspired the girl in the tower, which became Rapunzel, because they had locked her in her tower.
Yeah, I think she died when she was 54.
Yeah, she went mad. She never cut her hair. That inspired the story of Rapunzel, the girl in the tower.
I remember reading about that. That was a really good. I want to say that first book was based off of her, so this book was kind of inspiration from that. But it's not a vampire story per se. It's a completely different kind of story. But that was a big inspiration when I read about her years ago.
Yeah, a lot of people don't know she's Hungarian. A lot of people don't know that a woman has this record for the most kills. You know, they talk about it.
I think she had like 650.
Yeah, well, some say it could be as high as 700, but when they dug up the graves, they stopped counting after 500. So it was definitely over 500 people. They just stopped counting.
That's a lot of people.
They dug up her estate and salted the earth, you know, because vampires, they dug up the bodies and burnt them, you know, and they just stopped counting after they piled them up, you know. They're just horrific. And they locked her in a tower because they couldn't execute a noble. It was against the law.
Yeah, back then.
Yeah. Do you have a favorite book or writer?
Sorry, let me adjust my sound again. What was that, please?
Yeah. Do you have a favorite book or writer?
My favorite writer? Actually, there's probably a few of those because there's so many good writers out there. I want to say Dean Koontz, Nora Roberts, two of my top favorites. I do like a lot of Stephen King also, but it's a conflict of interest because I like so many of them. It's hard to pick one favorite, but easily Stephen King, Dean Koontz, Nora Roberts.
Being a horror fan, I guess you would. I mean, it's a good chance of picking King, but I'm not really into horror, so I don't know anyone else other than King. I'm sorry, but I have seen a couple of the movies, and I'm sorry, horror's not my thing, but I have seen some good like horror movies. I just can't remember right off the bat, but you know, Elm Street. But they all devolved, unfortunately. Although Annabelle was good, it's just I look at it from the story perspective. I'm not really a fan of horror per se. What research do you do for your book?
Excuse me, please?
Yeah, what research do you perform for your books?
How do I do research?
Yeah.
A lot of times, more times than not, when I'm in the zone, such as To Live and To Die For, pretty much almost all of them, what I do to research or to prepare for that is I will literally go to a local library. I'll start digging and researching anything and everything that I feel pertains to the story, such as this one, which I didn't have to do that much research actually, but generally that's what I'll do. I'll prepare my mind. I'll go into that one involved 1999, the time frame. So I didn't have to do a lot of research other than some of the people that existed before them in the story. I had loosely I think in the back of my mind, like a lot of authors might loosely base them off of different parts of their personality or other people that they've encountered over time. So I think the preparation for me is assimilating all those thoughts on paper, because I will literally take copious notes of places that people, the characters are based off. And they're never based off anybody real, but more times than not, they're like, I want to say parts of me and parts of snippets of conversations I've had with other people. Plus, I read a lot of books on different subjects, which is a big thing right there.
Yeah, it is
literally read everything under the sun just to get my mind to absorb everything I can. Because when I'm taking my time, I can remember a lot of different facts that probably aren't that useful. But for me, for that purpose, that's how I'd like to do that, because I can read it a couple of times and remember it all and start just typing it down like a madman.
Yes. I'm trying to think. 99. I really can't. It was all I could think about was the Y2K scare. and I was doing computer science, so I was really pushing myself, laughing at how people were panicking. And I said, you know how easy it is to resolder a chip? Like, all you have to do is resolder chips. Come on. You had years to prepare for this, and now you're trying to catch up. You know, now you realize. It was a big hoax, of course. It turned out to be a big hoax, and nobody got punished for it. Government swept it all under the rug. You know, all the Y2K just suddenly disappeared. Everybody just, you know, out with Windows 95 and in with XP. You know, as if nothing was. You know, there's a horror story in your mind, and I think that's the greatest horror, right? The unimagined.
Makes sense.
That's all I remember about 99. But if I did research, you know, if I wanted to write something set in the 90s, I'd do the same thing. I'd go to the library, get the yearbook for 99 and flip through it. And go, oh, yeah. And it's the same with people, right? You know the writer's meme? You know, your relatives ask, hey, what's your new book? And then you turn around and say, okay, first off, you're going to have to be really, really cool about some things. Because you know how even the slightest snippet, even if you quote somebody, you know, your relatives usually catch on very quickly if you ever base anything off them. So I tried to avoid that myself.
I agree. It makes sense.
Yeah. What advice would you give a new writer?
What advice would I give a new writer?
Yes.
Don't give up. Be as patient as possible. Because I imagine everybody has something in the back of their mind that might tell them, no, don't do it, or why are you doing this? But I do a lot of the writing for myself because I enjoy it. So I would tell that to someone new. Do it for yourself. I'd ask them what their goal is, because if it's not for themselves, then I think that would circumnavigate a really good reason to not do it. I mean, they should just put their faith in their goal in what they want to do and just try to make it happen without worrying too much, because I think worrying is going to stop anybody if they're just too frightened, or if they're just too nervous, or they think, what if I'm not good enough? I think that's just part of the human condition. Just my advice would be to not give up.
Yeah, I do think it is part of the human condition. Am I good enough? You know, the self-criticism. I mean, I just did a video on strengths and weaknesses, and self-criticism can actually be your strength if you use it right. If you use it as a honing stone to your craft rather than as a weakness that holds you back.
Definitely. It could hinder you or it could help depending on how you utilize that strength.
Yeah, and when building characters, you do the same thing. You find out you don't need to find out what their weaknesses are because you only need their 3 strengths, and there's all their weaknesses. Because you just use the antonyms. Yeah, you have the synonyms for their strengths. Why don't you just use the antonyms and you just have, a strong person who's confident to somebody else will seem you're a bit arrogant.
I can see how that might help some people.
Oh, it depends. I mean, in horror, I believe in horror you tend to be more exaggerated with strengths and weaknesses.
That's a good point.
I'm not familiar with horror, but I do understand that there are some where, the strengths and weaknesses have to be really exaggerated, because you don't want a strong, confident character to stand up to the antagonist from the start.
That's true.
Now, a lot of people associate writing with stress. We all get stressed from time to time. I mean, a lot of people won't admit it or they can handle it. How do you handle stress?
How do I handle stress? For the most part, I don't know if it has anything to do with it, but I was raised in the Midwest Missouri. So we were away from most people. So stress for me was, I don't know, I never really had to deal with it. And when I did, I would just push through it. If I couldn't, I would go around it. If I couldn't, I would just climb over it. But otherwise, when I was stressed, I had a harmonica when I was younger. I taught myself how to play that thing. If I was stressed, if I felt just a little anxious, I whip out the harmonica and play Silent Night. I literally taught myself how to play that years ago. And because Silent Night is such a soft melody, I akined at that to like how Mr. Miyagi used to say in Karate Kid, just breathe in and breathe out. Because what that does is focus your breathing. Once you focus that breathing, it'll get rid of the demons in your head telling you can't do this. When you know you can, you just have to have the fortitude to push through it. Or work around it.
Yeah, absolutely. Perseverance is one way to deal with stress. Music, definitely. Calming, self-soothing. Definitely a good way to deal with stress. And yeah, if you're stressed and you've got nothing to do something. Yeah, that's
what helps is music.
Yeah, it helps is music. Absolutely, self-soothing. Now
you get that vibe going, and you're in the zone.
That's it. And you do your best work when you're relaxed.
I'm sorry?
I said most people do their best work when they're relaxed. Are you a morning writer or an evening writer?
Actually, a little bit of both, because I work retail, so my schedule is all over the place. So some days in the week, I'm working in the morning, and then I'll have to be right at work in the evening the next day. So I don't get like an even 8 hours. So if I'm a morning person, it's because I train my body to keep going and then go to sleep later. But otherwise, probably an afternoon person because I enjoy when it's sunlight. But when there's no one around, when I'm relaxed, I enjoy the nighttime especially. But I miss my family. I don't really get to see my family or my girlfriend if I'm up and they're sleeping.
Yeah. So you got to really do a lot of time management.
Definitely. It's a lot of time management for the self. Yeah. Otherwise, I prefer to be in the morning.
Yep. Now, you've mentioned that you do a lot of reading. What else do you do when you're not writing? And
when I'm not writing?
Reading and work. When you're not writing, yeah. What
That's
activities?
A good question. Because when I'm not writing, I'm not working, I'm usually over at Planet Fitness weightlifting. I enjoy weightlifting a lot because for health reasons. I like to stay in shape. But I also like to go camping and like to get back to neutral. I'm sorry, my cats are trying to play now.
Yeah.
I like to go camping and I'll be bodybuilding a lot.
Yeah.
But the reading comes into play when I'm doing that stuff too, because I can focus, bring myself back to neutral. And I spent a lot of time with my girlfriend. I asked her if she wanted to get married, so we want to build a future together because we have a lot of the same interests. with the book. And yeah, she went to school years ago in college, so I chose a different route. I chose a tougher route because I couldn't afford to go to college. But those are the things I like to do. I like to camp. I like to go bodybuilding. I'll do that for 3 or 4 hours before I get tired, and I'll go home and take a shower.
Yeah, the Greek said that to exercise the mind, first exercise the body.
Definitely. That's actually right.
Definitely. Yeah.
I mean, even if you don't like to exercise, you can always go for a brisk run.
A lot of people, when they see a sketch of Aristotle, and they go, "What?" I mean, Aristotle was a bodybuilder. He would make Schwarzenegger a run for his money. You know, he was built like he was a big man. Aristotle wasn't this old crumbly man as you think in the book.
Aristotle.
Yeah, Aristotle's a bodybuilder in his youth.
I didn't realize he was so large.
Oh, he was a big man. Yeah, he was a big man. He wasn't small. He was quite a big man. Because people mostly associate with his older period, you know, when he was old and hunched over. And he was a giant of a man. He was big. He stood out amongst the Athenian intellect. He became soft. He spoke of the softness, you know, and how they became degenerate in the softness, you know.
Aristotle would have been a nice man to have met and talked to in person like an interview. Aristotle or even Archimedes.
Yeah, Aristotle was very keen on fitness and believed that intellectual debate is an exercise of the mind, and you can't exercise the mind without exercising the body. You had to be fit, healthy. Yeah, and of course, he spoke out too often about the excesses of the intellectual class, and because they ruled Athens, they were, you know, they'd become so comfortable and excessive. That's why they got rid of him. But his work slipped on, and they didn't.
Sometimes that happens.
Yeah. Sometimes it's the person who stands out, not the person who performs, who does their best work.
If I remember right, Michael Crichton was 6'9". At least that's what I read. Michael Crichton, the guy who wrote Jurassic Park.
Yes, Jurassic Park. Yeah, I read. What's the other novel?
Yeah, I read that he was 6'9".
Yeah, he wrote a book. I forget what it's called. It was made into a movie. The book is like way better than the movie. About the apes who are guarding Solomon's mine. Now they're looking for blue diamonds. That was an awesome book.
I love his stuff.
Yeah, he's very good. Yeah. He also wrote ER, apparently.
He probably did.
I think he did. I know he wrote a lot of stuff. He was very prolific.
Andromeda Strain, that was really good.
Yeah.
I read his Timeline and I read his Andromeda Strain. Those I really enjoyed. But they're also few of the few I've read.
But that was also very predictive.
Predictive?
Andromeda Strain, yes.
It kind of was.
Yeah, we would engineer viruses because we can.
It was.
Yeah. Nothing specific. Nothing comes to mind specific. You know, there were many instances that come to mind where people don't know what's happened until much later. Don't get your knickers in, they're not YouTube. But what is it? I'm trying to think of the other book that I read of his, because he was very diverse in his writing as well. He was very diverse, although I just can't think right now. Another one that I've read is Agatha Christie.
Agatha Christie?
Yeah, my grandmother was a huge fan. She had all the Agatha Christies.
I've actually not read any of hers yet. We used to have a whole bunch of books in the house, and she was one of the authors. I actually never got around to a chance of reading hers.
Yeah.
We had like an arsenal of books, though, all over the place, so it was hard to pick one out of so many.
Also, I've read a lot of the war novels because, well, my grandmother lived through it, and every so often she'd just grab one and she would laugh about how historically inaccurate it was. That was a thing of hers. She had lived through it, so she'd pick out all the inaccuracies.
Oh wow! So you lived through that?
Yeah, she lived through it. She was 16 when the Germans arrived in the Netherlands. And they did not invade. They just walked in. The socialists, they gathered at the borders, started ripping down the gates, arresting border guards who got in the way. The army didn't turn out to fight. It was a complete, basically, just a march straight through. The government was, even half the government had already capitulated a year earlier. You know, people don't understand how quickly fear spreads. And that's what she said. It wasn't so much that people believed the ideology, they just feared it so much, you know, that capitulation was all that people could think about, because there was the Americans. There's no, you know, the government returning to various countries for help. Everybody just kept saying no, 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 no. And they just became so hopeless.
I imagine if they're going to be there to feel that way.
Yeah.
This guy's a strong thing to just deal with.
Yeah. And for the fact that, you know, even today, you look at the people who speak out against authoritarianism, unfortunately, they often target everything but their own, you know, everything. You know, so what it does, it actually dilutes. Because Germans, what they did is they were very clever, right? She told me how they just campaigned over and over and over again that they were bringing peace or bringing peace or bringing peace, you know. That they would protect you from the various anarchists. And people forget there was revolution there was a revolution in 1917 in Russia. There were revolutions in Ukraine and Hungary and many parts of Eastern Europe. There was even uprisings in France every couple of years since 1883. So I learned a lot of history from her. And if you really want horror, you have to go to the fear of helplessness, you know. And I guess that's the only thing I really remember, is because I've learned so much true life horror that, you know, actual horror sort of like, it's very, very unimaginative. You know, I'd hate to be in that situation where it's where you have to fear your own government, and nobody is just sitting around sitting back saying it's your fault. You know, you antagonized them. What? But you know, that's reality, and sometimes the scariest stories come from reality.
A lot of them do.
Yeah.
They say that fiction, or actually, can be scarier than what was it? There was reality. A phrase a long time ago.
Yeah. Ripley. He had two. One is that reality is stranger than fiction.
Yes, that's it. I was trying to think of how that went.
Yeah, and the other one is the fear of the unknown is the greatest fear. I'm not sure if that was his or something he said later on when he was asked about his fears, because he is, you know, he had traveled. He was one of the few people in that period who traveled the world.
Makes sense.
When he started as a truth seeker, I think there was one I had my mother. There was the Ripley Museum I've been, and with my mother, and like we had the Ripley book, and some of the things he saw, like he went towns that disappeared in the desert, you know, literally just sank. You know, one day the town just sank. Could you imagine that?
I can actually.
Yeah.
I imagine that.
And it was found intact, like it was like really deep. Like they needed a mining crew to go to dig, and the sand just kept getting in the way. They built this huge shaft. They just
Almost
couldn't
like an
believe
avalanche.
what happened. Yeah, what happened to the town? Oh, they made up all the stories. It was somewhere in Nevada that people came and dismantled it overnight or something, But no, the people said there was terrible noise. They got outside and the town started to shift and the sand was rising. They just ran. And since then, we have discovered things like sinkholes. Was it dry? If the ground gets too dry, it changes the dynamic. And see, they built in a dry gulch, so they were actually sitting on a dry lake. It was huge, and it sank to the bottom of the lake. The lake had filled up with sand over time.
Yeah.
And it became a lake of sand. And basically, it was dry for so long, they'd forgotten all about it. But when huge rains came, that mud became so wet, it was so porous. So it was basically a sea of sand and water. And the town, of course, sank, literally sank into the. And of course, when it dried, it was back to normal, as if nothing had happened.
Interesting.
The weirdest things can happen.
Nothing would happen.
The weirdest things can happen. And because they happen once, a lot of people dismiss stuff like that. But there are things that go well beyond our imagination that we would rather not see them. Have you ever heard the expression out of the corner of your eye?
Something strange, something beyond the normal.
Yeah, it's out of the corner of your eye. You will literally look away. You will not rather look at anything but the paranormal.
I actually had something similar, slightly off the point, happen at an ex-girlfriend's house many years ago. Everybody else was still sleeping. She had the dogs and the cats. I knew right where they were because I got up before they did. I went to get ready for work. And as I was coming into the kitchen from the living room, I saw someone walking behind me. I'm like, okay, good morning. Then I realized whoever that was did not pass me by. I looked into the living room because they had one of these windows that was like 6 feet wide by about 6 feet tall and went to the ceiling. So you could see right in there. There was nobody in there, despite that I saw someone coming towards me from my side just as I turned to go in the kitchen. So I looked into the bathroom and I could hear the dogs sleeping because they were breathing off to the side. And I'm like, okay. Yeah. So I got ready and I ran out the door and I didn't go back until I was out of work that day. That's just kind of, I was not expecting it and it freaked me out. I ran out the door and I went to work.
See, that's the thing. We've got no explanation for the supernatural whatsoever beyond religion. So a lot of people will dismiss the supernatural, or they will, say you're high or anything like that. Now, it's the same with UFOs. And if you've seen Tucker Carlson's interview about UFOs, you'll actually understand that there's a lot of researchers out there who've been looking at this and saying it's all supernatural. It's all out of the corner of our eye. If there is something strange in the sky, because we're starting to get used to it, so now we're looking straight at it. But in the past, people would look away.
Because it might be something that's been there the entire time and we just never noticed it because we can't see the entire thing in the spectrum.
Yeah. And I've seen the flying discs, and I can tell you they're not machines because they have no substance. They are literally, if you look long enough, they stop being an appearance of a machine and they are just literally a ball of light. It's a weird transformation. And you can actually look at the supernatural. If you experience it often enough, you can look at it without looking away. Because I've seen UFO sightings where there have been dancing lights in the sky, and people will literally be walking around looking at their feet.
Did you say UFO?
Yeah, a UFO. Dancing lights, dancing lights in the sky. They are lights. They are literally balls of light.
I've read about that. That's actually one of my favorite pastimes. I do a lot of reading when it comes to UFOs, UFO sightings, and UFO kidnappings. I have like 29 books on that subject alone. I've read through all of them twice.
Yeah, my theory is that they're actually crossing into the dimension of luminosity, right? Multiple dimensions at the same time coexist. Now, we don't know how exactly transdimensionality works, but there's a thing called luminous space, and there's a lot of research into that, and that UFOs are probably originating out of the light, the upper plane of light on the spectrum.
Another plane?
Yeah, they're upper spectrum. They're always there. We just can't see it. For whatever reason, there's a transdimensional shift or some sort of electromagnetic disturbance that allows us to view like a lens into that spectrum.
That makes sense, actually, because that reminds me of one of the books. What you just said remind me of a certain what was his name? It wasn't Nick Pope. It wasn't Nick Redfern. It was an everyday guy who was a skeptic. He didn't believe in it. And then he started getting abducted by someone he thought was either in the government or aliens. And he said what he was describing didn't look human. They just looked humanoid, which made him a believer. And he started writing books on it ever since.
Yeah. A lot of people say that if we're likely to discover aliens, they're going to be inner space, not outer space.
I've heard that Mac Tawney's had that same belief. If I remember right, he was from my home state of Missouri. Mac Tawney's believed that they came from the inner earth, not from outer space.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I heard he passed away of cancer, I think.
Yeah. And I hate to bring it up because it does sound political, but a lot of expeditions into the inner earth have been military. And there's a lot of people who've given horror stories about wiping out civilizations.
It's quite possible.
That it's been going on since the time of Napoleon.
Might have been further back than that.
Yeah, but it's just our fears are so ingrained into us that I think a lot of people just will look the other way rather than confront the truth. And I know the possibility of life out there is so remote, yet at the same time, it's going to be like a billion stars. One of them, if we're 1 in a billion or 1 in a trillion, there are other galaxies. It is, even if we're the only ones here, there's over 1,000 galaxies that we mapped. Are you going to tell me we're absolutely certainty that we're alone in the universe?
They're probably
bacteria on Mars through spectra analysis.
That's actually a good point because they could have been there the entire time watching us as we proceed with life, as we evolve.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder if, they didn't have a law to keep from interfering with ours or with us.
Well, the general theory is that the Martians, as they advance, they literally up and left. Because rather than take over Earth, they looked out rather than in.
I always thought the same sort of thing myself because it would be easier to do it that way.
Yeah.
We're not unique.
Yeah, and again, what about past ice age civilizations? We've now found, 5, 6 civilizations that we've never mapped before. We have nothing in our history books. That these were so long buried that they are pre-ice age. So again, what if they achieve? Because you think a building we build, after 300 years, it's going to be virtually crumble, right? Or most man-made materials crumble after 100 years. Heck, most stuff you build won't even last a couple of years.
Yeah, that's true.
So you think the atmosphere is full of water, and water is the greatest solvent in the universe. So freestanding structures within 1,000 years are going to be dissolved, maybe longer. But think, the Ice Age is over 15,000 years ago. And civilizations before that are most likely entirely all but wiped out. There would be nothing left. They would just be barren deserts, and we wouldn't know what was there before. And the only evidence we have of anything existing there is what they call structures, okay? Whenever you build a structure on the soil creates some sort of mimic where you actually get lines in the soil that are only visible through certain infrared and ultraviolet spectrums combined. And you can actually see the outlines of cities in the desert.
That excuse me, that may very well be. Because there's so many things we can't exactly explain in our terms.
And that gives people a lot to think with, a lot to work with. You know, that there were actually, it actually gives credence to, I forget where it comes from, but it's been a popular saying in science fiction forever, and fantasy too, that we're in the third age. We're in the third age of man. I think Tolkien also brought it up that, you know, with the elves, you know, this is we're the second age and you're the third age. What was the first age? The third age is the age of man. So it's gives you great. There are lots of cultures who, in their mythology, say they're descendants of elves. So who are we to say they're not?
That's true. That's actually a pretty good point, because is there any other way to see it?
Yeah, and who's got to say that the elves didn't leave? I mean, if you're going to travel with space, you have to build a sufficiently technological civilization. And as your technology grows, it's generally believed as your technology grows, your civilization population shrinks, becomes more concentrated, more to the point where you're probably where the last of them build a ship and go, you know.
Definitely. That kind of makes me think of that.
Shrinking civilization, I think it's called. Basically, as your technology rises, your population shrinks. You become more and more concentrated on the. As you become more and more specialized, more and more concentrated, hypergamy takes over. So 100 women instead of marrying 100 men, you get 97, 98, 96, 95, it starts to shrink because the wealth shrinks, the resources shrink, and eventually civilization reaches its peak, and either it dies out or moves on or breaks up.
Makes sense.
And that we're actually reaching critical mass where, look at Egypt, it lasted 10,000 years. It's sorry, Third Kingdom lasted 5,600 years. It's the longest. But after that, each one just kept getting shorter and shorter. The Third British Empire lasted 350 years. It's the second longest period of history we've had with least amount of wars. Prior to that, there was the Incans. After they had finished their conquest, they had nearly 500 years of peace before the Spanish arrived. Now, what's the longest peace in the modern era? 20 years?
Perhaps.
And the empire crumbling. We're watching the crumbling of empires right now. We're watching the crumbling of the American empire as countries join new alliances.
Yeah.
So, and that's only a couple hundred years since its formation, depending on how you want to look at it, or post-World War II, how do you want to look at it? But rise and fall of civilizations are getting faster, which means we're getting towards peak technology. And we all know that there's more technology out there than better technology than what we have, right? And they've been around for, even governments have passed laws to actually ban technologies because, like, either the chips are too powerful or so fast they can process huge volumes of information, allowing hackers to these hack, codes that would normally take years to crack.
Probably take at least another 20, 30 years, maybe.
Yeah, eventually, you'll have, terahertz chips.
Each time we think something's impossible, a modern day genius will come along. Not to name drop any certain names that bought Twitter out, but people who seem like any other person, but they'll have far out ideas and they'll be able to discover things that we didn't think to.
Well, they've already discovered a new force. It's actually a force in physics, and it's like a twist, and it rotates. If you can harness that rotation, you can actually move from that, and you can actually have a tiny grain of sand roll across the table.
You're describing perpetual motion?
No,
like
this
a perpetual motion machine?
No, this is atomic force. Right? It's an atomic force, but it's a vortex. Basically, and the vortex creates, it's like a roll. It can roll.
Okay.
Atoms. This is how atoms move. They literally can move. If there's sufficient energy input on the right spectrum, the atom will move because you've actually powered the engine. At rest, it's still moving, right? The core's still rotating, but it's not rolling. It hasn't got enough energy to roll. But you give it enough energy, that's how they power those tiny macro machines. They built an engine of 9 atoms in size.
Size of an atom?
9 atoms, yes, it can roll.
Oh man, that's tiny.
Yes.
That's minuscule tiny. That's like literally, you have to have like a magnifying glass, or not even a magnifying glass. You'd have to have something like a microscope to see down that small.
Huge machine to see it. Yeah. And we've already got companies that have etched, like IBM in 1939, etched IBM on an atom. So tell me that the technology today is far superior to that. With, the stuff that the government's setting on just boggles the mind that they can assemble them. And we heard in the 90s that Saddam can assemble smallpox from university samples of different viruses. And it just passed over people's head. It just passed over people's head.
It might pass over some people's head, or at least the average person, yeah.
Yeah. Because, again, it's just so far out there. It's so supernatural in their eyes. Same as you told them, there's an atomic, there's forces. There's about 13 forces. The most common one we use is speed, meaning for expansion.
That kind of makes you think of that phrase that, what was it? I can't think of his name all of a sudden. He was saying how science, magic, look almost identical. I can't think how that phrase went at the moment.
Magic is, if science is sufficiently advanced enough, it will appear to be magically primitive.
That's it. They had that posted at the local library here where I'm at, about 8 miles away. And each time I went there, I would read it. And today's one of those days I'm remembering most things, but I'm not remembering everything.
Yeah, there is actually a theory that magic is a technology beyond our understanding, that basically a magician is somebody who has in normalized supernatural ability, but what if it's just somebody who understands force, atomic forces, and able to use the vibrations of their own body to manipulate? If you understand that everything is vibrations, sound, light, all the forces, they're all just vibrations on different levels.
Oh, definitely, because you have it in music, you have it in water, you have it in everything.
And sound can travel in space. It's just you can't hear it because you don't have the medium against your ear to hear it. But they have measured sound in space on Voyager.
That's not unlike when someone is trained in the Navy and they train your ears, or not train your ears, they will test your ears to see the frequencies you can hear compared to other people. And if you keep going, then, well, hell, you're hired.
Sonar over there. Yeah, that's right.
Exactly what I was about to say.
Sonar operators, they put them in a soundproof room with a headset, and they play different sounds and see if they can remember them. So you get operators so good they can say, "Yeah, that's a Russian battleship. This is the Minsk. That's the 6 different. I think the 6 different ones. This is the Minsk. The Minsk is the common one. The big, the 2 big carriers they got, a Minsk class, I think, currently, and then you've got the new one. I forget its name, but it's 90,000 tons, so it's a lot. It's got to be able to sound again. It's going to be much deeper. The bigger the chip, the deeper, the harder it is. It's easier it is to hear. The bigger the chip is, it is to hear. But at a range, still telling the difference between the 2 chips. And protecting submarines becomes all about sound and ultra low frequencies. And of course, then you've got the other uses of sound detection, and of course, that's weapon discharge, using the audible difference in the frequency shift to measure where it's coming from. They can measure its range, distance, altitude, everything. I learned about it from a different perspective. Back in the 90s, when I was doing computer science, we were actually creating a audio generator, a program that used all the, to create surround sound effects in video games. How to calculate all the different calculations so you can shift the sound's frequency so it appears to be not just from left or right, but front and back, by shifting the sine wave you apply an algorithm to the sound, and it will actually shift from where you hear it coming from.
Yeah, it's actually amazing when you describe it like that, because it makes it sound like the sound is propagating, and then if you're hearing it, you can probably differentiate where it's coming from, where it's going, the bandwidth, maybe.
Even though your brain knows it's coming from right beside you, because the sound is identified, like what a door sounds like, a door closing, right? You can actually hear it's coming from over there because of the shift in the frequencies. Because it shifted the sound like this, and then compressed it like that, so it sounds like it's coming forward. And then if you want to put it from behind you, you just increase the height of the sine wave, and it sounds like it's coming behind you. Slow it down, compress it for in front. Yeah, you're altering the wave. So there's just amazing technologies out there since the 90s. I mean, and of course, eventually we'll start reaching peak technology, which is when things slow down. Like, I was seeing it with books, with people unable to come up with so many people unable to come up with new ideas, though we still try. But, I think with writing, it has to be all about the presentation. It doesn't matter if the story's been told before. If the presentation is good enough, like Star Wars, it's not an original story. But if the presentation is good enough, people will accept it. And I think that's where a lot of modern authors fail, is rather than thinking about an original story, think about an original presentation.
I think we're lagging a little bit on the signal.
Yeah. Well, we'll call it. It's an interesting conversation, and thank you for coming. It was great chatting with you. And we're definitely lagging.
Sorry about that. I think it's the signal or something. Is something like it's got a little bit of a few second leeway there.
Yes. Thank you, everybody, for watching. Please like and subscribe to the channel. Check out the links in the description below. Elliott's book. Sorry, I just forgot his name. Where is it? Sorry, what's the name of your book again?
It was great having you. I appreciate doing this.
Well, yes. What was the name of your book? Sorry.
The name of the book is To Live and to Die For by me, M F Elliott. It's actually one in several books. It's one of a series of books. It's a standalone, but by the same name, different titles.
Okay, I have the book linked in the description below, as well as his author link on X. I'm sorry, you have to just check out the click his name. It's in the you just search his name in the title, you'll find it, you'll get him there on X. Sorry, X doesn't let you put discrete links, which is a pain. And to support the channel, make a donation through Ko-Fi, become a patron, buy my books, or buy my merch. All the links are in my link tree. Please and thank you. See you in the next video.